One of my most memorable experiences was they wanted to test us out for voiceover work. Voiceover work is you're playing a video and then someone's kind of narrating over it. And so they had us read basically a voiceover clip that they were going to use for a CrossFit video. We just stood in this line and we're just going to read into a microphone. One, I have a massive public fear of reading in front of people. Ever since grade school. I hate it and I stumble over my words and I panic. And in front of me is Sean Woodland, who has the greatest voice I have ever heard in my life. And he's so good at what he does. And Sean Woodland reads this excerpt. And this is a guy that's done sports broadcasting and news like his whole career. This is what he does. And he sounds the way he sounds. He goes in front of me and I was like, I don't even need to. I don't want to do this. It's like you're doing a presentation in school and the smart kid does their project and you were next. It's like, I have to follow that. Yeah. It was like, I got like a sentence in. I was like, I don't need to do this. Like, I'm not going to be this voiceover guy. You already found him. He went in.
Welcome to the Best Hour of Your Day podcast. This is your host, Felix. And in this podcast, I am interviewing CrossFitters and experts from around the world. In this episode, I sit down with Chase Ingraham. Chase is a 2010 CrossFit Games competitor, and he's on the broadcasting team for the CrossFit Games for over a decade now. In this episode, we talk about the evolution of the CrossFit Games, and we also speak about the future of CrossFit Games broadcasting. So lean back, relax, and enjoy this episode with Chase Ingraham. Welcome back to the podcast, Chase. It's good to have you here.
Yeah, dude. I know we've been trying to schedule this for a month more?
Probably a month, but I think that's still not that much time. I have guests on my show, which I wait like 6 or 9 months. So that's just fine. Sure.
Really? All right, good. I wasn't too much of a prima donna to extend the time of coming on the podcast.
I mean, podcasting usually is like something you do when you have spare time and you have a lot to do. You have 2 kids, you have jobs, and so I really appreciate it when someone takes the time, usually his free time, to sit down with me and talk about my passion, hopefully your passion as well.
Oh, for sure. And, being in the space, podcast space as well, I have an understanding of the difficulty it can be to get schedules to align with one person, let alone multiple people. But I think not to say you feel the same way to project what you do, but like there is that understanding and appreciation for what this entails and what this is. And I'm always, available to, and wanting to just talk to more people in the space, especially in the CrossFit space. It's really cool.
Yeah. As we talked before, I feel there's so much more to talk about, especially in Europe and in Germany, especially because there are a lot of CrossFit boxes who were established during the last 5 or 6 years, but there are not so many people who really are so deep into CrossFit and they talk about it like we have in the US, right? There are so many CrossFit OGs who have their own shows, who have their own YouTube. And in Germany, it's like a couple of people who really want to share something. And that's why I feel like I have to invite guests like you in order to spread the word.
Oh, hey, if I'm considered a boost to a podcast, that's a compliment and a half. So I appreciate that.
Of course. I mean, you've been in the game for a very long time. I did my research on you and I found out that you had a games appearance, which I didn't really know, actually. I'm so sorry. I mean...
It's okay. Not many people do.
But I have to say that this was before my CrossFit start. So I started 2012, 2013, and it was 2 or 3 years before.
Yeah,
so
2010.
My apologies. No,
it's not something I boast about or put on an Instagram profile or have, an accolade or anything. But yeah, I qualified and competed at the games in 2010 as an individual. And I'm very proud of it, but I also understand that it was a different time and a different place. And it is much different now to make the CrossFit Games than it was 10, 12 years ago. So I also have a healthy perspective of, different time, different place, but I'm still proud of it.
With your first experience on the CrossFit Games, there was no media team, right?
It was very makeshift. So in 2010 was the first year they actually had a broadcast. And it was, it was, it was very, I would say, loose and long days for those guys. But Marty Sage was one of those first broadcasters. Justin Judkins was in there. Bill Grundler was a part of that, and I think he like emceed as well, because at 2010, and the first event was Amanda, and Dave Castro decided to MC the whole event. And this is when they took a lot of people to the CrossFit Games. I want to say over 80 or around 80 individuals, men and women, qualified. So, and I think the heats were maybe 10 people at a time. So Dave Castro calls like, and on an MC, like the guys on the competition floor with the microphone, the whole first event of the CrossFit Games, and loses his voice, I think, halfway through. And so to get other help, I mean, imagine losing your voice on the first day of competition at the CrossFit Games, and you being the director of the CrossFit Games, and what the next 3 or 4 days are going to be like. But yeah, there was a small broadcast team, and it was kind of a hodgepodge group of individuals. And then in 2011, a bit more, I would say, official, right? It's never really official. I feel like we're still kind of a ragtag group of individuals that just have a passion for calling the sport. And then in 2012 was the first year they really started putting a big team together with a focus on covering the sport more professionally. So 2010 was kind of a trial run. 2011 is like, okay, we could do something with this. And that's when Reebok came into the fold in 2011 too. And then they started making the like the ESPN shows post-produced in 2011. And in 2012 is actually the first year they covered a regional, and then had a big team for the CrossFit Games. But I got to be a part of that 2012 crew. Yeah. So not super OG as the 10 and 11 gang, but yeah, I got to be there pretty early on.
What was your first experience as a broadcaster?
It was so bad. So I remember this was in Ohio. So Columbus, Ohio, home of Rogue Fitness. And it was the Central East region in 2012. And like, hey, it's going to be on ESPN3, which ESPN3 is basically the online version of ESPN coverage. And they brought in, I want to say, over 12 people to basically try out a group of individuals to cover the sport. And I think I was given the play-by-play or gig for like the first half of the heats of teams only. And so you had, and a play-by-play person is Sean Woodland, right? If anybody knows that name, Sean Woodland, who has the greatest voice I have ever heard in my life. And he's so good at what he does. He's there. And immediately once he started talking, I go, oh, I'm not getting a job if this guy's here. Like, why am I here? I have no media experience. I've never done this before. And it was just trial by fire, like a lot of old school kind of like CrossFit jobs were. He's like, hey, can you do this? And your answer is always yes. And then you just try to figure it out on the back end. But one of my most memorable experiences was they wanted to test us out for voiceover work. So if you voiceover work is you're playing a video and then someone's kind of narrating over it. And so they had us read basically a voiceover clip that they were going to use for a CrossFit video. And in front of me, we just stood in this line and we're just going to read into a microphone. One, I have a massive public fear of reading in front of people ever since grade school. I hate it, and I stumble over my words and I panic. And in front of me is Sean Woodland. And Sean Woodland reads this excerpt. And this is a guy that's done sports broadcasting and news like his whole career. This is what he does. And he sounds the way he sounds. He goes in front of me and I was like, I don't even need to, like, I don't want to do this. It's like going after, like you're doing a presentation in school and like the smart kid does their project before it was, and you were next. It's like, I have to follow that. And
you're fucked.
Yeah, it was like I got like a sentence in. I was like, I don't need to do this. Like, I'm not going to be this voiceover guy. You already found him. He went ahead of me. And yeah, it was just it was pretty much panic mode the entire weekend. because we really didn't know what we were doing or how to do it. And if you go back to those old, I mean, even now, like going back and listening to myself of a year ago, it's just rough. It for me, but it's a way to improve your craft, pick up on the things that maybe your clutch words, the ums and the uhs and the so's and the things that you tend to lean on when you get nervous or you lose your train of thought. And it's a way to, just like a coach would if they were to video their class. And the last thing they want to do is go back and watch that video and look at times you weren't paying attention or bad cues that you gave or other things that you always focus on the negative, but understanding where those happen and what they are helps improve your craft. And it's the same thing for broadcasting.
10 years later and you're still here. So I think you got the job, right?
Yeah, I so far, I feel like every year is a earn it year. Just with anything. And the shock was after those regionals in 2012 is that I got a call back to come to the CrossFit Games and do, I think I did, again, it was only like the first half heats of the individual women for play-by-play. And after that weekend, I was like, I'm done. Like they'll never call me back. They'll never call me back. And for some reason, as you said, year in and year out, they keep calling me back. And every year, I never assume I'm going to get the call. Every time I do, I'm greatly appreciative of it. And every time I get an opportunity to broadcast or be a part of anything on the media is that I earn the right to be there and hopefully earn the right to come back. Every single time, year in and year out, for a decade now, going on 11 years. And the fact that I get to go back to the CrossFit Games in a couple of weeks, I think is very special to me. Every opportunity I have to be there. Again, is that it's I take it very seriously, even though I'm not like what you consider like a serious kind of guy.
So what were some of your most iconic moments? I feel like you're one of the persons who really watched every single event of the CrossFit Games. You probably have some moments, some memories in mind which pop up, right?
Let's see. It depends on what you say iconic.
The funniest thing that you witnessed.
Some of the ones are when we maybe think we're off camera or the audio mics are off, and then I end up saying things more candidly than I'm supposed to. And one of the ones I remember was it was the final of the women's, individual in 2015. And they brought out, it was the pedal to the metal. So they brought out the pegboards and then they brought out the heavy dumbbells and they brought out like heavy kettlebells, heavier kettlebells than we've ever seen. And I was just on the mic and well, I wasn't on the mic. I thought I was off the mic. And I'm like, man, those are some big fucking kettlebells. And then I'm getting like texts from friends and family. They're like, we can hear you. And I was like, oh no, what else did I say? And, but one of the most iconic ones that I've talked about this a few times is one of my favorite events at the CrossFit Games ever. Had nothing to do with me broadcasting. It just, I was just there. And it was men's individual 2014, Rich Froning's last year. I believe it was a Friday night. Maybe it's a Saturday night. I think it's a Saturday night. And it was push-pull.
Push-pull thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I watched that like 2 or 3 days ago. I don't know why. I just happened to watch it on YouTube and wow, that got loud, right?
It got loud, but so when we were in Carson in the Home Depot Center, StubHub Center, we broadcasted from the boxes. And where the boxes were is like, if you just think of like this, it's really like an oval. On either end, on the short part of the oval, were like basically boxes. And we would broadcast from there. So not only did we have the best seat in the house visually, our setup area where we weren't broadcasting was just next to it. And it was just glass windows that you can open up all the way and an empty room. So the sound that would just get sucked into this room from the crowd was, during that time, borderline deafening. And so we would just open the windows and like sit on the windowsill with our legs over the top. The security people did not enjoy us doing that. But I got to be in a position to just soak it in. Because in the broadcast, you're a part of it. You get riled up and you get into it, but like you have basically like noise canceling headphones on, so you can hear the crowd, but you have no idea how loud it truly is. And you're so focused on what's happening and telling the story of the action in the moment is that you don't usually get to soak in the moment as much. What I got to do is just sit there. I wasn't a part of that. Like I was doing teams, this was individuals, and I just got to sit there and watch this thing take place. And like loud does not describe the intensity of the moment at the end of push pull with Josh Bridges trying to hold off Rich Froning. And it was, that was a very special moment to be a part of, broadcast team wise. And then a fun one, I think this was last year. Usually I try to stay somewhat professional on the broadcast, but at the same time, I do want to be real and authentic. And if I'm enjoying something, like that's going to shine through. And it was at the end of, I want to say, I don't remember what the name of the event was, but it was the wall facing handstand push-ups and echo press. And we were coming up to the time cap, and it was in a men's heat, and we see Tim Paulson get on this bike, and he's 30 cals to finish, and it's like 45 seconds left, which to any normal human, you're like, okay, I need at least 2 minutes to finish these 30 cals. And he goes absolutely berserk on this thing. And I totally just like lost. I just got in the moment, and I'm just like screaming for Tim to finish it. And I'm screaming for him to send it, and totally dropped the whole broadcast thing and just became a fan. The problem is I had a microphone in front of my mouth as that was happening. So that was a pretty fun time as well.
Can I watch that on YouTube? I have to watch it.
Oh yeah, it's there. It's there. Yeah. Yeah. We got soundbited a couple times, but that was fun too. And the thing in general with the broadcast is I like to watch it as obviously an analyst first, because that's your job. You're there to not critique, but you are there to analyze and / critique everything that is happening. So if an athlete is doing something on the floor, the viewer needs to know what's happening. And that's Sean's job. He's a play-by-play analyst, and he tells you exactly what's happening in the moment. The analyst's job is to tell you the why, the how. Is this good? Could this be bad? What are the potentials there? What are the implications of what's happening? That's your job. And on the flip side is that at the same time as I want it to come across as if we're just like two dudes on the couch drinking a beer and talking about what's happening on the screen as well. Like I want that type of feel to it, because that's how it feels to me. It doesn't have to be like we're in this box of professional announcing. It's like, yeah, we have certain things we need to do to tell the story, but at the same time, let's just really enjoy what's happening in the moment. And I try to do a bit of both, whether people like that or not. I mean, it's not my problem. It's who I am.
That's why I like podcasting. It's my show. I can decide if I like it or not. I don't care.
Right. Yeah. Oh, you don't like it? Don't listen. It's all right.
So you do podcasting and broadcasting. Do you like both equally, or is it that if you were asked to drop one of those, you would know what to do?
If I were asked to drop one of them, I would drop podcasting, just because I've been doing the broadcasts, like I said, this would be my 11th year. And it's just it's an adrenaline rush for me. Like broadcasting is the closest I can get to competing. Not just like with proximity, but feel. Like when they're counting down, when they say 10 seconds, I get nervous. I get pregame jitters on the broadcast, because it's, on a podcast, it's loose, right? It's like we can say whatever we want, talk as long as we feel like. There's no start, stop. You can, curse or not curse and cut. And, it's like, unless it's live,
easy, right? Everyone can do it.
Yeah. It's not easy, but it's, you can go at your own pace and do your own feel and flavor, and ask whatever questions you do and don't want to at your own timing. On the broadcast, like it is like it's intense. Like it's very intense. And I think people confuse the two. They think a broadcast is like a podcast. And it's not. It's not the same thing at all. Like we call it like long form, short form. So for example, it's like we can casually talk at our own pace in conversation and change directions any which way you want to. Tell stories at length, which I have a problem of doing. So anytime I get a little long, please cut me off at any time. And a broadcast is like it's in and out, right? Say something, it has to be like worth the breath of saying it and waste of airtime to say it. And you have a short window to do it. And it's this dance you have with your partner in the booth, with the producer and directors in the truck. Like it's super intense. And a podcast is great. It's long form. It's storytelling. It's shooting the shit, certain aspects, and I really enjoy that part too. It's kind of a yin and a yang relationship. But if I were to pick one, just from the adrenaline side and the intensity, like the broadcast, I would take.
Did you ever check how many calories you burn during a
No, I
broadcasting
never
session?
have. Actually, I should do that. Maybe I'll wear, yeah, I'll get like a Whoop or an Apple Watch and just like hit workout before the the broadcast.
Yeah, we make a comparison like podcasting versus broadcasting.
Yeah,
Anaerobe versus aerobic.
that would be really funny. Really funny.
I never did the broadcasting thing, but when you tell it, I feel it, right? So I get an adrenaline rush just by listening to it, right? Although I didn't really experience it. So that's so cool. I should somehow try it out, I think.
Hey, it's what my hope is. I know you didn't even ask me this question, but like the future of basically like media coverage in CrossFit. I would hope, and this is more, I don't really know the intricacies of it. So this could just be, that's not realistic conversation. But I remember in 2019, they had a world feed, just a clean coverage feed of the CrossFit Games, which they would offer. And I think you had to purchase it or license it a little bit to use on maybe your own YouTube channel or other broadcast channels to basically cover it in their own space. I know Morning Chalk Up used the feed to do that. Rogue used the feed, and they were the main coverage that year. But what I would love to see, and I think this aligns, well, I know this aligns with a message that we've heard from Don Fall, the CEO of CrossFit, was trying to reach 30 million people by 2030. And the way to do that is to, and I think this is a part of why you have this podcast, is getting more media outlets around the world to help cover the sport of CrossFit, where it is a very US centric media team. That most of the major podcasts or YouTube media come out of the United States. You got other bigger ones like Craig Ritchie's podcasts, obviously is up one of the bigger ones. Jason CF Media, but to have a clean world feed where you from your podcast, which you live in Germany, can take this feed and do maybe your own coverage style of the CrossFit Games. And you can do it in your native language. You can do it to the time frame at which your demographic is watching. And you can do that all over the world. You can do that in every country that has the ability to take a world feed. So not only is it going to be broadcasted or covered in a way that you would like to, which is personal to you and your podcast, it also speaks directly to the demographic that could be watching your channel that wouldn't normally watch it because it's either in a format that they don't really care to watch, which could be an official broadcast, or it's in English and it's a language that they don't really want to take the time to think through and listen to when it could be in their own native tongue. And I think that would be a really cool place to start broadening the media coverage worldwide for something like the CrossFit Games.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. And I hope at least some of it will eventually become true.
Yes.
Because I feel like you're always, in Germany especially, you feel like you're not really part of it because it's so far away, right? I consider myself a CrossFitter and I do the open, I do I never qualified for anything else, so I can't really say that I'm anything else more than an open athlete, but it's okay for me.
Hey, the open's
But the CrossFit Games, yeah, I mean, it always feels like a different sphere, right? You cannot really feel it. Maybe you can go there and then you feel the spirit, but
yeah.
here you just, you watch it on YouTube and it's nice and you see the athletes competing, but it's so far away.
I like what you said, and you're 100% right, is that if you've never been there, it's hard to feel what that is, even if you watch it at home. And like I said, it's like you don't get how loud it really is, unless it's like a really spectacular moment. Like anybody could watch, say, the Capitol last year and feel something when they watch it. Anyone could watch push pull at the end, and it can be very exciting, even if you really didn't know what was going on, just because of the nature of the event and what was happening at the time. But yeah, if you've never been to the CrossFit Games or any type of live CrossFit competition, it's really hard to make that translate, especially if it's with people that you maybe not know or events that you don't really understand. And the excitement isn't there because it's not manufactured by 5,000 people sitting in a stadium with you. So yeah, that is a thing.
A problem to be fixed.
No, it's a good perspective.
I think we had a lot of development during the last 10 years, and I feel like it's not the end of it. And there will still be a lot of improvements. I mean, if you look at the development of the games, it got more professional from year to year. And now it looks like a fucking big sports, whatever.
It's a spectacle.
Call it NFL, whatever. It's just big and it looks professional and it's really cool. And let's see. Let's wait and see what happens during the next years. And I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, and I think too is getting feedback and ideas from people outside of the quote bubble. Right? It's like, I can't have your perspective. No one can. And how many of those that have, in a position that you're in, like your own podcast around the world, have a different perspective of what the CrossFit Games is? Because I can only see it through my experience. That's it. And so how can I truly create something better without a different perspective? I can't. I can have ideas like, this sounds cool. You're like, actually, no, that doesn't really work. That's not how I see it. And I think people are afraid to give their perspective for whatever reason. And it's like, no, the more perspective we can gain from people all over the world that want more, right? They're not sitting here as like, oh, do better. Like, no, this would be great if we had this, because this is what it's like watching it from here. And if you don't share that information, like, how can they get better? The problem is you don't know where to go or who to say it to or how to say it in the right way. Some people do share their perspective on a broad internet-based platform and maybe not do it in the best way, but it doesn't mean they're wrong. But also the way it's delivered can turn off those that are receiving the message. So I think it's very valuable.
You have to find a way to communicate, right? So it doesn't matter. You have to say something at least and not keep quiet.
Yeah. And I know CrossFit has been listening more than they ever have in the past, especially the last, I would say, 2 to 3 years. Now, I don't think people should be afraid to give their perspective. Call it perspective, call it opinion, call it constructive criticism, call it whatever you want. But if it could help, they should say something. And even if it won't help, just having that open line of communication, I think, is very, very valuable. Because look, if we asked for, I say we, as if like I'm a part of that, but you're going to get 1,000 different ideas and opinions. Can they act on all of those? No. Could they act on maybe 1 or 2? Probably. But if we're not getting any, where can the innovation come from? Because internally, like I said, it's like forest through the trees. It's like, I can only see what I see. But if you're sitting up there at a 10,000 foot view and you're like, I see this, have you guys ever thought about that? It's like, no. Thank you for telling us.
Spread the word. That's why I like to invite people like you. So we come up with some ideas and we share something with people who probably didn't even know who you were before, and that's very important. That's very big, and yeah, so cool.
And so, like, I think a worldwide feed that can be licensed or sold to any platform that wants to use it is, I believe, the future of the coverage of our sport. And say something on site. And I don't know how much you know about, like, our biggest American sport, the Super Bowl, which is the NFL. Like, they have a week leading up to it where it's just interviews and the athletes, and they have something called Radio Row, where all the major, minor, like in your basement coverage people, whether it's podcasts or radio shows or TV shows, they set up there at the Super Bowl, and it's just rows of coverage. It's like, at the games, how awesome would it be to provide opportunities to have a radio row of any media entity around the world that would want to come in, whether it's on site and you can have your own setup, or a queue of podcasts and coverage that are around the world that some athletes can do virtually.
That would be really cool.
Yeah, that's just things I think about that can help grow the coverage of the sport worldwide on a grander scale with, I think, relative ease, other than, say, like moving the CrossFit Games, which is, I know, a common thing, especially Europe would love the CrossFit Games to come there. It's much more difficult to do something like that, much more difficult than it would be to provide more opportunities to have at least coverage here. To start, right? Is that in the future? It's like, I do. I mean, the Olympics move around every 4 years, but that's every 4 years. It's a little bit different proposition, right? Like, these host cities don't necessarily like pay CrossFit to be there in a certain sense, right? Where, like, the Super Bowl or the Olympics, like, cities and states like bid to buy that competition. Like, that's what they do. Are we there yet? No.
Yeah.
Can we get there? I do believe so. And I would love for that to be the case.
Yeah, I think the first thing that needs to happen is that more Europeans qualify for the CrossFit Games. And if the population is like more than half, then maybe we have a better chance. But now if you look at the leaderboards and the games qualifications, you still have a lot of Americans, which is pretty cool. But I'd love to see more Europeans. And I think this year looks pretty good. And I think it gets better from year to year. Let's see what happens during the next 5 to 10 years.
It does get better year to the year. I mean, the women's side especially. The top athletes we have in the sport right now are mainly coming out of Europe. Men, not so much, but I think there's a new group of athletes that are coming in that can help carry the torch that, the Ionikowskis and the Mikko Salos and the BKGs have laid the foundation for going forward. The women have always just been crushing. I mean, Annie, Katrin, Sam, they've been owning the game scene, other than, Tia Toomey that got her 6. Whereas, like, the American women or North American women are trying to get on a podium, right? But when was the last time anybody won it? It's like 2010 when Chris and Clever did.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah. But I think the opportunities are there. But it's like, okay, Europe qualified. They had one super semi, which qualified 11 or 12 athletes, both men and women, to it. And the United States had 2 of those, or North America had 2 of those. But if you look at, more opportunities is one thing, but having the athletes that have the abilities to be in the top, I think, is different. We're getting closer, as you said. We're not totally there yet. If you just look at the numbers on a leaderboard, like top 20 men, there's like 4. I think 4 men out of Europe that are top 20 worldwide after 3 weeks of semifinals. And that's just games qualifiers. Women is much more. I think like 4 to 6 are in the top 10. So we'll get there. It won't be even though. I mean, unless Europe has more athletes qualifying that rank up there in the top 20 to 30 at the CrossFit Games.
I ask you the same question, which I asked Boss the other day. What are your hot picks for this year's win?
Ooh, I don't know if I have any like hot takes as far as men and women, just because I'm in a camp of if you've won 1 or 2 times, especially in a row. So say like Justin Medeiros, can he potentially be dethroned at the CrossFit Games? Yes. And I think his percentage of getting beat is higher than we'd see on the women's side. That being said, is like you've won 2 in a row. You really haven't shown too many weaknesses or chinks in your armor over the last 2 or 3 years, especially in live competition. So I'm not going to vote against you. So punting to Justin Medeiros, repeating as a third time. Until someone beats him, I'm not going to pick against him. As far as the podium's concerned, 2 or 3, man, I don't know. Like on the men's side, especially, is like, I would like to see, well, I'll say, I think Jeffrey Adler can podium for the first time. And I would say Jeffrey Adler, even though, God, Vellner and Fikowski looked so good this semifinal season. But I would say if we're going to do hot takes, Jeff Adler in the top 3, Fikowski and Vellner both miss, and maybe an athletes like, I don't know, Roman is hard to vote against either. So I'll say Medeiros, Adler. I'll give Adler second and Roman third for the men. For the women, I think Laura can win, and not necessarily in the aspects of like, okay, she, has gotten second twice, third once out of the 4 times she's really competed live at the CrossFit Games, even though 2019, I don't really give anybody any like negative points or positive points for 2019 because that year was so freaking bad. But what I really liked from Laura this semifinals was the way she carried herself in competition, how confident she was in herself, and how much of just like she's gotten some swagger. Like before, Laura's been pretty quiet, right? Like she doesn't talk a whole bunch. She's not on social media a lot. She doesn't do the podcast circuit. She just puts in work, and that's really the only videos you'll see. It's like, okay, this is me squatting, this is me Olympic lifting, this is me in the pool, this is me on the track, and this is just what it is. I'm not going to create anything like flashy or casual. And that's kind of how she did. I don't know if she liked it, but she was always under the radar, even though it's like you got second, and third. Like I think where's the respect that we're getting? Is like, oh, it's because she's just isn't trying to get it. She's not trying to get the accolades and the attention because she doesn't want it for second, and third. She wants it for first. And she's not giving herself any credit for losing to Tia 3 times. Right? Like that doesn't, like people just like, oh, well, I got second to Tia. Like, I'm pretty great. It's like she was pissed. She wanted to beat her. And I think now you can start to see that confidence rising. She's like, yeah, I am a major player. I am okay with being a favorite, and I'm not going to shy away from that. And I think I saw that at semifinals. So I really like that addition to Laura that may have already been there, just it hasn't shown, or she hasn't really shown it. Right. And just like, she's so good at so many things. And regardless of the like one weakness she has, which is what everybody else tends to focus on, and I have too in the past, like she's a monster. So I'll say Laura. And what I think will happen, or what I would like to see happen, I think it'd be really cool to see Annie back on the podium one more time. Yeah. Right. So she gets podium with less than a year of her first child. She goes team the next year, which really gave her, I think, the space to improve without taking a step back. Right. Because some athletes are like, hey, I need to work on this. So when I work on this, I'm going to fall behind in some things. Like you can only gain so much and give up so much to get in other areas. That's just how it works, unless you're Tia. But I think going team was a great decision for her physically, mentally, keep her training, change her training, work on things that she really needs to. I mean, how much better can she actually get? I don't know. I didn't know but she continues to do so. And so I think Annie getting on the podium and that third final spot, I'll give Annie third. Second place, I think Gabby and Magawa and Daniel Brandon have an opportunity to surprise some people. I know probably more are focused on Daniel Brandon because she possesses all the physical qualities that can podium, hands down. Gabby, maybe like Laura, again, isn't that flashy. She just does hard work. But what she did at semifinals, I think it was like, oh, okay. Because we started to see that ascent, I would say 2021. Like the end of the CrossFit Games 2021, Gabby made big moves. And she had a great 2022 season. It might not have got reflected at the CrossFit Games as much, but her 2022 season was great. She's been trending up. And I really liked what I saw from her at semifinals. So, got a European sweep on the female podium. 2 training partners, and then the OG Icelandic queen herself. I'll say Laura Gabby.
It's okay for me. I take it.
I know I just talked 10 minutes about who to pick. But it's hard, man. That's what's so cool about this year is that all of those could be right and none of those could be right. Like there's not one sure thing going into this year.
Yeah, we have to make another podcast in a few weeks when the games are over, and then you and me and Boss and we sit down together and talk about your best guesses and see what happened.
Usually I'm wrong. But we'll see.
Yeah, it's exciting. This year is very exciting, and I'm really looking forward for it. And
I'm excited to be there. I'll call most of the men's competition at the CrossFit Games, but I'm with you. As this year is very exciting, and I know we've let a few athletes that won't be competing this year. I mean, obviously, Tio is out, Cara stepped out, Haley, Mal, and Rich steps away from the team competition. And you'll hear people say, "Is like, oh, where's going to be the excitement this year?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Like, yes, you might not have the favorites there or the people that you want to see the most, but it's going to be so exciting because no one can just sit there and be like, this person's going to walk away with it or at least podium at the minimum. So we're cheering for like one spot on the podium. Like it is wide open. It is wide open. There's 5 or 7 athletes for both men and women that can interchange in those top 3 spots. And I hope we get that potential. And I think we will. And yeah, are the biggest names going to be there? No, but like, does that mean the excitement's going to be less? It's like, absolutely not. I think it's going to be more exciting, in my opinion. So I can't wait.
If you had to choose one repeat workout for the CrossFit Games, is there anything that you would like to see?
Of all the CrossFit Games events, I want to see the climbing snail come back. I talked about this in another podcast. So the big drum snail push, climbing snail is like 3 rounds, 4 800-meter run, push a snail, legless half rope climbs. And like, that was a really cool event. And it had everything. It had monostructural with running. It had gymnastics with the legless rope climbs. And you had this snail out there that, was just pushing people around versus them pushing it around. I wouldn't want to see it. Like my favorite event of all time is push pull, but I don't want to see that come back. Like, don't take the best thing that's ever. It's like they should never repeat the Capitol, right? There's just events you don't repeat because of what happened during it. But just like cool CrossFit events like the 21-15-9 complex. Such a cool, like really neatly constructed test, 21-15-9, but it was, 7 deadlifts, 7 power cleans, 7 power snatch, and then 7 chin over bar pull-ups, 7 chest to bar, 7 bar muscle-ups, and then 5 of each and 3 of each. Like that was so cool. And what athletes could do with that now, I would be really curious to see almost 10 years later, right? That was 2014. Something like muscle up biathlon. See, like, can everybody go unbroken this time when only like 3 or 4 did it last time? Events like that. I don't want to pick too many classics to come back, but I'll say this is, I'll say climbing snail's my answer, but I say in the future, I would love to see, and this could be boring to people. We have benchmark workouts, right? To see how much better we got. Like, okay, you did Fran 5 years ago. What's your Fran now? I would love to see a repeated CrossFit Games. And my pitch is 2014. Like, take the 2014 CrossFit Games. If you guys don't remember that, push pull was a part of that, but triple threes was a part of that. 21-15-9 complex, muscle up biathlon, speed clean ladder, push pull, midline march, thick and quick, double grace. Like all of these things were in the 2014 games, and I thought those were awesome. And it would be really neat to take that and just repeat it. I mean, we have repeated benchmark tests for a reason. How cool would it be to take an entire one and just see how the entire field has changed and evolved over a decade, 12, 13 years later? Pipe dream. Could be anticlimactic for people, but I would love to see them repeat the whole 2014 games. Oh, they had what was another one? I think it was like pier swim with thrusters and burpees. And yeah, I think that was 2014.
I think it was like one of the first games which I really watched on YouTube. So for me, it was the most memorable CrossFit Games. So I would really love to see it. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll pick an event, climbing snail. We'll throw that in there. What I want to see again repeat an entire CrossFit Games.
Okay, thumbs pressed. Maybe you will not get disappointed at someday. Let's see what happens.
A couple weeks. Yeah, a couple weeks. The question is, do you think they'll repeat anything this year?
That's a good one, but I think they should. I don't know what, but I think I think that's always, even with the Open, that's actually one of the things I love most about it, is to see how I have progressed over the years. So when I saw the chipper in this year's Open, I did it like, I think it was 2015, I think.
Yes. I think it was 2014.
Yeah. And I exactly knew where I did it, when I did it, how I felt, that I did, I think 1 or 2 or 3 muscle ups back in the day. And I knew it, that I had improved when I did like almost 20 muscle ups, right? I knew I had improved, and that was such a great feeling.
No, it is. And it's part of our training methodology. Benchmark tests, measurable, observable, repeatable. And have I gotten better? Well, how do I know? It's like, well, I did this 3 years ago and I did it again and I got better. All right, so I am fitter. I'm stronger, faster. You have these measurements that are part of our DNA in our culture. So yes, you should. It's always good to see something repeated at the CrossFit Games. I agree.
Chase, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me about the CrossFit Games and your career and your expectations for the CrossFit Games this year. And I would really love to have you back again on the show in the future.
Anytime. You know how to get a hold of me.
That's so cool. Thanks a lot, and enjoy your games, and see you soon.
Yep. See you on the internet.
Bye-bye. If you like this episode, please leave us a rating on Apple or Spotify. See you next time.